Welcome to Wellness to Wonderful, Reinventing Your Health. This is our bi-monthly Spotlight on Health, brought to you by the Center for Nutrition Studies. My name is Natasha Lance, and I am the Chief Operations Officer here at CNS, and have the distinct pleasure of doing the housekeeping this evening. So for those of you who may need closed captioning, please go to the bottom of your screen, and it says Show Captions, and there is a CC. You click on that, and then you will be able to have closed captioning. Anyone who has questions for our esteemed guests this evening, please put those questions in the chat. We have with us this evening, Renee Saka. She is a physician associate and also the coordinator for our medical advisory board. She will be going through the chat and collecting those questions. So please put your questions there. We appreciate it.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks, Renee. And also the replay, for those of you who are interested, it will be available early next week sometime. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our host this evening, Dr. Mike Hawley. Dr. Michael C. Hawley, MD, is board certified and currently on the staff with the Allergy and Asthma Group of Galen in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and is a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Dr. Hawley is the speaker for Dinner with the Doctor, which is DWTD, in the US and in Romania. Dinner with the Doctor is an instructional program developed to educate people on how to implement a whole food, WFPB, approach for treating, preventing, and reversing disease. He was the medical consultant and appeared in the documentary Eating You Alive. He and his wife, Cindy Hawley, MD, along with their adult children, embraced the whole food plant-based approach to health. Dr. Hawley is the chairman of the Medical Advisory Board for the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies. Mike, I'm handing it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Natasha. Well, it's our privilege tonight to have Doctors Alona Pulde and Matthew Lederman as our guests tonight. They have recently written a book called Wellness to Wonderful, 9 Pillars for Living Healthier, Longer, and I like this part, and with greater joy. And so we're going to be talking about their book, but let me just give you a quick thumbnail background on Doctors Pulde and Lederman. Matthew Lederman, MD, is a board-certified internal medicine physician and CNVC certified trainer of nonviolent communication. Alona Pulde, MD, is a board-certified practitioner of acupuncture and oriental medicine and family medicine physician. As a husband and wife team, they have been successfully in the corporate medical advisors, featured experts in the documentary Forks Over Knives, lecturers for Cornell, and adjunct medical school professors. Together, they have co-authored 6 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Forks Over Knives Plan, and most recently, and our topic for this evening, Wellness to Wonderful. Their latest venture, We Heal, integrates their decades of learning and practical experience to help people achieve lasting health, vibrancy, peace, and joy through nutrition, lifestyle, and connection medicine. Welcome, Alona and Matthew. Glad to have you both with us this evening to talk about your new book.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for that wonderful introduction.
Yes, thank you, Mike.
So let's just start off with the obvious question. What was it that inspired you to write this wellness book after you had so much success with other books and Forks Over Knives? What was it about this book that really inspired you?
Yes, so we have really jumped into this field of connection medicine and the fact that nutrition is so important. Lifestyle, exercise, sleep, things like that are also really important. But there's this other piece that there's so much data coming out now that connection affects you physically, affects your physical health, it affects your inflammation, it affects all sorts of neural pathways and hormones. that can impact chronic disease in ways that nutrition alone can't. And similar to 20 years ago, where nutrition was becoming bigger and better and more, whole foods, plant-based diets were becoming more of a mainstream. We really want to see connection and connection medicine become another big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. As I read your book, that theme of connection, which I'll have you get into more in a little bit, but that theme of connection is woven throughout your book, and it brings out how important being connected to self and to others is in our overall health. So the title, Wellness to Wonderful, and wonderful means a lot of different things. I like that word. I use the word a lot. Tell me what it means for you all and why it's the title of this book.
Yeah, so much of that comes from, when we think about we're constantly taking inventory over our own health, constantly attempting to optimize where we are, and in that, provide fodder material that we can share with others. And in taking that personal inventory where we had, our diet and our sleep and our exercise, all of that honed and I would say near optimized, and still not quite feeling like we want to feel. And how I want to feel is, in a world of infinite possibilities, I want to feel wonderful. I want to feel great. And that doesn't mean that every day is great. That doesn't mean that every moment is great. That doesn't mean that I'm living in the up of life all the time, but that I'm navigating the ups and downs in a way that provides agency and the quality of life that I desire. And in that, the word wonderful really stuck. And so our hope is to get people past illness and chronic disease and beyond wellness, which has become kind of baseline for a lot of people. We define wellness as how we are at baseline, but at baseline, many of us don't feel great. And many of us don't feel healthy. And many of us don't feel vibrant and alive. And so it almost has lost that spark. And so we want to take them beyond this baseline wellness to a state of life is wonderful.
Yeah, I like that. So it's moving to that next level up, because as you said, wellness has sort of just become, it's baseline for everybody. Yeah, I'm well, but this is much, much more than that.
It's Mike, when we start with our patients, instead of saying what's wrong, we start by asking, what does right look like? What does wonderful look like? What can I do? Or what if this was different in your life? You make life a little more wonderful for you. And that term, for a lot of people, say, oh, that's a pipe dream. I'm trying, just barely keeping it together. Well, if all you're focused on is keeping it together, wonderful is not even possible. Right? You got to have your eyes set on something, even if it's hard to get to, right? You can't and when people are keeping it together, they're trying to put out fires. They're trying to focus on what's wrong and stop that. But you can't get to New York if you're in Los Angeles by trying to not go to San Francisco, right? If you want to get to New York, you got to have your focus, and it may be hard, it may take a while, but that's the focus. So even if it sounds like a pipe dream, that's where we got to start, if that's what you want. And if life is great for you now, then don't do it. But if you have problems with sleep and fatigue, and you're not able to stick on your diet plan even though you know what to eat, and you're always snapping at your kids, and your intimacy with your partner is not the way you would like it, and you have social anxiety and feeling depressed, and you're not, every Monday morning is like all you can do to get out of bed, right? That you can't address that if you're just trying to put fires out. You got to focus on wonderful, and then it may take a while, and you may take a lot of support, but that's the key.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Matthew. Even those that may feel like they're at quote unquote wonderful, when they read the book, they're going to realize that there's a lot of holes in their wonderful that they could patch up and make better. So I think that's an excellent point.
It's actually a lifelong attention. It's not a destination. I mean, we were telling you before we started, right, that we had some issues with our family where our 9 pillars are way out of balance. And it's not about keeping them always in balance. It's about being able to recognize when they're out of balance and knowing that they exist so you can start tending to them again. And it's a lifelong caring for and supporting these pillars for the rest of your life. And the process of doing that actually starts to stimulate that sense of wonderful.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Well, if you all could go ahead and introduce for us, there's a theory called the polyvagal theory that's weaved throughout your book. It's really a central concept and a very important one. We were talking about it a little bit before we went on, but if you all could introduce this concept of polyvagal theory, the threat, the inflammation, the safety, and all of that, and how that relates to our overall health.
Yeah, so I'm going to overly simplify this, but the polyvagal theory is basically saying, it talks about our autonomic nervous system. And our autonomic nervous system is how we were designed. Even at the cellular level, we are trying to assess our environment for threat. And it's not a thought cognitive process. It's sort of below the consciousness where sounds are coming in and visual cues are coming in and sensory cues are coming in. And the nervous system is scanning. And if we're safe, we can do all the functions of homeostasis. We can grow, we can reproduce, we can do all sorts of fun stuff. And if it says we're not safe, we're under threat, it's going to prepare to defend. It's going to go into a defensive posture. It's going to become antisocial almost. Even at the cellular level, they start to withdraw, and then they prepare to fight and be in threat. When you are in that threat state, that's a pro-inflammatory state, right? Blood flow shifts in a way, pro-inflammatory cytokines, pro-inflammatory hormones, the whole 9 yards. And that happens when we do things to our body that it's saying is dangerous, whether we're eating really unhealthy foods that it thinks is, hey, I've never seen, what is this McDonald's hamburger? This has got to be toxic. And you have a response to that, just like you would to some other poison, right? You have also, if someone's coming at me and yelling at me, I'm going to go into a defensive posture and be like, what? And when I do that, whether I'm eating the burger or someone's yelling at me, I think I'm going to be attacked. My body has the same physiological response. It has the same pro-inflammatory response. So what we have said was, you've got to get the diet right, get rid of the McDonald's hamburgers, and you've got to get the connection piece right so that you can also navigate that. And that's where the nonviolent communication comes in. It's a tool for people to interact with each other and interact with other people so that you can stay in that safety state, only going into threat when you absolutely need to, and then you pop right back out of it, back into safety.
Excellent. Alona, anything to add to that?
That there's a self component too that is really important, and we can dive more into that. But the connection to self, the connection to the authenticity, and the allowing yourself to show up in that authenticity is also a measure of safety. Whereas so many of us suppress and repress so many things about our life to belong, to be accepted. And that takes its toll with this inflammation cascade as well.
Right. Think of the nervous system as tons of feedback loops. And the feedback loops are going back, and the brain is sort of like the mothership and checking with the kidneys and the stomach. It's communicating with all the different organs. It's communicating with the skin, the environment, the gut, right? And it's basically saying we're safe, we're good. And the gut is feeding back and saying, hey, everything down here looks good. When there's a block in that for a variety of reasons, either coming centrally, right? There's something at the central nervous system, we're depressed internally, that can affect the gut. Or we can put something in the gut that then goes back to the brain and it causes, so it's bidirectional. But what's really interesting, did you know that I learned this, that when, if somebody's brain dead, if they're basically, you've cut off signals from the brain to the rest of the body, right? Organ inflammation goes up through the roof. So in other words, people that are about to do organ transplants and they don't have that communication back from the nervous system saying, hey, we're safe, everything's good. inflammation starts to happen. And that's what happens over time. Very quickly, these organs will show high levels of inflammation. Just a way to explain that you need that constant communication back and forth, saying, hey, we're safe, there's no threat, so that these organs can function normally. And what's happening for people now, when they have chronic fatigue and anxiety and inflammation and all sorts of other problems that aren't getting better just from diet change alone, is that their body is essentially in this chronic threat physiology, and that's what we can reverse.
And I think to note that it's an active process, because as Matt said, we have evolved to go to danger first. Our brain scans for danger because that's a survival mechanism. We don't want to be thinking and rationalizing and reasoning when the tiger is coming at us. We want to be running. And so we scan for that danger automatically, and we have to actively turn on that safety valve. And there are so many different ways to do that. Wellness to Wonderful addresses, a number of them, and connection is one of the really important pieces, both self and to others.
Yeah, self is your first pillar in the book. It really sort of introduces and gets us sort of thinking about that as we go through the various pillars. Can you take that word connection and unpack it a little bit more and tell us, what does that mean for the average person? How is that woven into our health?
Yeah, well, we can start with the self pillar and how that shows up. And in self, the connection really is to your authenticity. There is so much, if we take a moment to think, how much of myself do I hide from the most important people in my life? Because I'm afraid of their reaction. I'm afraid of being rejected. I'm afraid of not being accepted and being dismissed or whatever, or alienated from my tribe. And so we hold that in and we push it down, and that creates that sense of threat. We are living in a constant state of threat that says we are not enough. And it is dangerous to show up in our authenticity. And one of the things that connection and nonviolent communication can help with is the ability to express ourselves in vulnerability and with authenticity in a way that also respects and takes the other person into consideration, and that dialogue becomes a gift that both people participate in, grow from, and benefit from.
Yeah, I like that. And what you're alluding to a bit is another key component in your book that's mentioned several times, and that is recognizing your needs and also recognizing the needs of those around you. And one of the things that I love about your book is how you all take a lot of these, somewhat complicated concepts perhaps, and simplify them into practical ways, and you give examples. Sometimes they're personal examples, something about maybe Matthew or Alona, or about your daughters. And one story that comes to mind is looking at needs, is when Matthew was away, he was calling into home, and he was talking with Jordan, and Jordan decided she needed to yell into the other room to her sister and ask something, but this was hurting Matthew's ears. You want to finish that story for us? Because I found it was simple, but yet took into account that she figured out, okay, Dad's needs are this, and therefore I'm going to do this. And Dad had a different idea than her idea. And I loved how all that simple story played out.
Yeah. So Matt's need was to have some respite from that yelling, and he wanted the conversation just to stop. So his strategy was either stop yelling at Kylie, or I'm going to get off the iPad or go talk to her. Meanwhile, Jordan had a completely other strategy to meet that same need, which was just to mute him for a minute so she could finish yelling to Kylie and then come back to the conversation. And Mike, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's another piece that nonviolent communication can contribute so much to. Many of us are attached to strategies and have confused that with our needs. We need to go to the gym. We need to yell at Kylie while dad's listening on the phone. But really, no, those are strategies that we use, behaviors and actions that we use to meet underlying needs. When we can address and recognize what the needs are, the strategies become abundant.
And what's interesting is that when we talk about nonviolent communication, people almost put things in silos. You're talking about this is like parenting, or this is psychology. So this is over here. And we're talking, oh, we're worried about health, or we're worried about nutrition. But that's what we're trying to get, is that it's all connected. When I yell at my daughter, my physiology changes in my body. So does her physiology, right? If I yelled right now, or maybe I'll yell somewhere later in the webinar now, and we'll scare everybody, but you'll feel it in your body. That's your autonomic nervous system, right? Because the hormones take longer to sort of, you're talking about 20 minutes, cytokines can be released in minutes, right? So to me, you want to know that it affects your physiology. So don't just be nice, connect, and because it's good for your health. And then the question is, great, I'm interested in connecting, and people, well, I'm good at connecting. What are you talking about? Well, when I thought I was good at connecting until I learned about nonviolent communication, and I said, wow, when I first started, I had 3 feelings: good, bad, and angry. Right? Those are my 3. I didn't, good and bad aren't even feelings, but that was my feelings vocabulary when I first started. Right, and it was something I could learn. Or I thought, hey, I'm not that, I wasn't born this warm and compassionate guy. Can I really talk about feelings and empathy? But it's something you can learn. I think our natural state is to be compassionate and empathic. But over years, we might have been educated in a way that brought us away from that, and we can come back to it. But it's not just a nice to have. It's not just good for the marriage. It's good for your physical health.
And it comes back, we describe our 9 pillars as an infinity loop. And the infinity loop starts with that self and that self-connection and that ability to show up in that authenticity. And then it branches out to sleep and activity and play, things that we can kind of hone on our own. And once we've resourced enough, because that resourcing is really important in allowing us to show up for our external world, to get the benefits of family and friends and meaning and purpose from our work and spirituality and connection to nature, all of that impacts one another. So in the same way that, Matt is talking about that, like he yells at his kids, and internally his judge is active, and that night he's worrying about it, and he doesn't get enough sleep. And not getting enough sleep impacts how we eat, in the sense that we are going to consume more calories. It's scientifically proven. We're going to eat more calories that day, and we're going to choose less healthy options. We're going to be tired. We're not going to want to move, and it's going to make us snappy and short with everybody, which starts the loop all over again. So there's a really solid impact for all of these things, and they all interrelate. So when we think about, well, I know what to eat, how come I can't do it? That's the opportunity to look at, where amongst these pillars do I have opportunity to pay attention? And that attention will impact those food decisions that I make.
Yeah, go ahead, Matthew. You're going to say something.
I love what Alona said. It's all interrelated. And it's so hard at the same time for people to really grasp this, right? To really understand connection the way we're talking about it. It's not about being married. You can be, the only thing worse I tell people than being single and being alone is being married and feeling alone, right? And to me, that there's a lot of people that are married and still feel very alone. Right, that right there is a pro-inflammatory state. That is a threat state. Your body is going to say, hey, this is dangerous. I am alone. I am vulnerable. I can't be in this. And then what we've done is we learn to suppress that, because we've learned to be, good kids, right? Or good workers, right? Because outside we have to do what we're supposed to do, right? So nonviolent communication gives you a tool that it's not like, well, either I get my needs met or my partner gets their needs met, or I get my needs met, or my kids, but we can't both get our needs met. One person wins and one person loses. NVC is about finding ways for everybody to win. And that's what's interesting. From the point, I don't care how long the conflict has been going, at the point where both parties can tell you what the other person's needs are, it usually takes 20 minutes or less to get to a strategy that satisfies everybody's needs. The problem is they haven't been talking about people's needs. They've been conflict over the strategies.
And I want to just give a concrete example because sometimes that's hard to take in. It's every little thing that we do that we're resentful, that we're not doing willingly. It's one more knock in not only in the inflammatory cascade, but in how we relate to our family and our friends and our work and however we see our world. And that could be as simple as, I'm needing rest and ease today, and I do not feel like making dinner for my family. But I always make dinner, and I'm a mom, and I need to make dinner. So I'm going to go resentfully and make dinner. And that impacts my health. It impacts my relationship with my family and my kids. All of that obligation versus, hey, family, let's sit down together. I'm really needing ease and rest today. I don't really feel like making dinner. What can we do as a family? Well, maybe we can order out. Then the family comes together. Hey, mom, maybe we can help you. What if we were your sous chefs? Would that help? Maybe, each of us can make the one thing that we do. Maybe we have cereal and milk for dinner tonight. There's so many different strategies that all of a sudden come in when you can show up authentically. And all of that is health promoting for my body, because hearing all those strategies, hearing my family come together to collaborate to help my needs for rest and ease, that is such a message of safety. So just pointing out that these can be really small little pieces of our day too.
And if it sounds like some people say, oh, this is fluff, right? Get me to the hard medicine, get me to the hard nutrition. And I believe that if you think this is fluff, you either don't understand it, we're not doing a good enough job explaining it, or you're really suppressed yourself and there's some opportunity there to do some inner exploration. To me, I don't know if people know, but pro-inflammatory cytokines, which I just explained, are released in response to a threat state. They increase insulin resistance, right? When you're about to go in threat, you don't want to store energy. You want to mobilize energy to fight threat. So people who are worried about, hey, I don't want to have increased insulin resistance, well, then that means that being in a threat state is something you want to avoid. But most people are so used to living in those states, right? Living in a mobilized threat state, that feels natural. It's not natural, it's just a habit.
Yeah, and I think as I read through the book and you look at the different pillars, you cover the different aspects of everyone's life. In particular, you mentioned sleep, family and friends, our work, our spirituality, and then the last pillar, natural world, looking at, really kind of habits in a way. And so you cover very nicely in the book how all of these components of connection and needs in particular all weave through there. I liked the example that your family uses something called a duck meter to decide if somebody wants to do something or not. If it's not, I forget, 7 or 8 or 9, if it isn't high on the duck meter, then you got to find some alternative way to do things. And you might want to elaborate just a little bit on the duck meter, because that kind of takes into, it's a tool to how to work with people.
Yeah, it's basically about saying that we don't want people to do things when they're not in choice. Because if you do something when you think you have to, when you don't think you have choice, that automatically puts you in a threat state. That's going to feel dangerous, because if you don't have freedom, right? Anytime I hold someone down and say, you have to do this, you're going to go into a defensive posture. So we're not saying we never have to take away choice, but it's our last resort. And we reserve that, particularly with children, in states of health or safety. And even when we take away their autonomy in those states, we have compassion and we mourn the fact that we can't find a way that preserves their choice. So we're very, very careful when we take away choice, but most of the time once you have this understanding and a little bit of skill around nonviolent communication, you can get everybody's needs met without taking away choice. But it's very hard to show up differently. One, when we don't understand, you don't know this information, or two, when you're so under-resourced that you have zero capacity for any flex. You're just like, I am barely keeping it together. Remember those words, I'm barely keeping it together. So just do what I say already. Don't ask questions. Why can't you just do what I say? And that sounds familiar because I've said it a lot of times in my life. I'm saying we're not by any stretch perfect, but I know when I'm saying those things, that's a sign for me to stop and say, wow, I'm under-resourced right now and I'm disconnected. And what do I want my reasons to be for my kid or anybody to do something? That's really important to me too. Not just what do I want them to do, what do I want the reason to be behind why they're doing it? If it's out of fear of punishment or threat or that I'm not going to love them, then I don't want them to do it for that reason.
And I think just to add on to that, when we feel like our choice is taken away, we're left with kind of two options. We either submit and just suppress it and do as we're told, or we rebel. We see that a lot in children who are, before they get into their teenage years, are really dependent on their caretakers. And so a lot of their responses in an authoritative state are submission. Think of a boss that's authoritarian and we submit and then we rebel later, whether it's with gossip or not enjoying our job or looking for other jobs or not being as productive, efficient, and, and as wonderful as we could show up in that work state. And kids do the same thing. And when they get to those teenage years and we talk about, oh, what happened to my beautiful child who was so wonderfully perfect up until they got to be 13, 14. Well, now they have the agency to rebel. And so that's what they do to maintain their choice, because choice is so important to us. And when we disconnect with that, we enter that state of threat, which impacts all of the other things that Matt mentioned.
And I'm going to say it again, because someone joining now, like, what are, Matt and Alona are talking about parenting. This is a nutrition webinar. What are you doing here? It's all connected, right? That how you respond to your children, how your children respond to you affects their physiological state, affects their physical health. It affects their level of pro-inflammatory cytokines, their allostatic load, right, their stress load. It's all connected. So when you put them in that state where they have to submit or they think they're not going to be accepted and lose attachment, that's a threat state. That is not good for their health. And there's another way. That's the beauty. There's another way to do it and still get your needs met as a parent.
Right.
You just don't know it yet. You haven't learned it yet.
And you can replace parent with partner, spouse, coworker. There's whatever that setting is, it's the same interaction and the same result.
Yeah, that was what I was going to mention, is that, you may not be a parent, but you're somewhere in your life, you're going to have interaction with people. And this book covers it all. I mean, self, nutrition, activity, play. I want to come back to that one in a moment. Sleep. And then there it is, family and friends and work. Most of us work. And then spirituality. The natural world, it is all covered. It is all interconnected, and it is all part of our health. And that was really apparent to me when I read your book, is that it's all, as you say, interconnected, and we can't ignore it and expect to be in our optimum health.
Exactly.
So play, that was one that I was like, read that, I was like, play, really? Didn't realize play was that important. But then I read in your chapter, there's all these negative effects of not playing. So maybe you could talk just a little bit about how play is important and why it's important.
One of the most immediate benefits of play is that you can't be in that threat state and play at the same time. And so when we can enter that spontaneous space of fun and safety and joy, and it can be in a variety of different ways how we play, and presence. When you play, you're also very present to what you're not worrying about the future. You're not thinking about the past. You're engaged in this moment of whatever that activity is. And there are a lot of different ways to play. It could be an active play, it could be joking and humor, it could be storytelling. There are a lot of different ways depending on what resonates with you, but incorporating that into your day-to-day is a really important piece for health and wellness.
Right. Play is one of those that it's a need and can also be a strategy. It's a fantastic strategy working with kids to get needs met. Kids prioritize play pretty much above anything else, right? I mean, it's so important, and it's so important for their development. It's so important for the health of their nervous system. I just can't say enough about play. And play is hard because if a lot of people were taught, stop playing around, right? Get to work. What are you doing with your life? Right? So we've been sort of, again, it's that education. It's not our natural state. It's a habit that we built through education of not playing, to the point that a lot of people, sadly, don't even know what they would do if they were asked to play. If I said, I'm not going to put you on the spot, Mike, but if I said to somebody, hey, you have 3 hours right now, and all you can do is play. If it's not play, you can't do it. And what would you do? And for a lot of people, that's a hard question to answer.
And it's an important piece of social interaction and social engagement. And so, partners, or even in the workforce, introducing play, incorporating and integrating play really allows for that connection to enhance in a variety of different settings.
Yeah, like I say, I learned a lot in that chapter, because I'm one of those that, playing is not high on my priority list, but after reading that and some of the science behind it, I thought I better start playing a little more.
I ask people, when they come to that realization, I say, how did you like to play as a kid? That's sometimes a good place to start, right? I can't get He-Man dolls anymore, but I think but I may be dating myself, but I think figuring out what you used to do as a kid and start there, right? That's a fun exercise, at least.
Yeah. So talk to us just a little bit about sleep and the importance of sleep. And we all know it's important, but tell us a little bit more about how that fits into this overall plan for great health.
Yeah, well, sleep is something you have a much harder time doing when your nervous system is in threat. And depending on the level of threat, you won't be able to sleep at all. And you can mobilize nerves just working really late and intensely. In fact, in full disclosure, I did that last night. Right? There's a deadline, and I was working right before bed, and normally I don't. I have a sort of a wind down routine, and it took me 2 hours to fall asleep. And I'm thinking to myself, look what you did, man. And I was like, and I sort of laughed because I'm like, I know what I did. But that's an example. A lot of people have trouble sleeping. Well, your body's there's nothing wrong with your body. They're like, oh, there's something wrong. No, you're not supposed to sleep when you're in threat. Why would your body want to sleep when it's in a threat state? It's saying, hey, there's danger. I'm not going to bed. So what we have to do is we got to learn to soothe the nervous system to say, hey, how can we go to sleep? And how can we feel safe? And in fact, I do that with my daughter. We have a breathing exercise that we do. And if I don't do that breathing exercise, which is really good at calming the nervous system down and regulating, she will take significantly longer to fall asleep, to the point that now she asks for it, right? And everybody can find what works for them. There's lots of ways to regulate the nervous system, but sleep affects your health. It affects what you eat. It affects, cancer recurrence. It affects cardiovascular disease. It affects growth. It affects hormone levels. I mean, I can't think of something it doesn't affect. And if people knew even 10% of what we talk about as far as how valuable sleep is, you would never again sacrifice it for more time in your day. You would say, there's got to be another way. I'm not sacrificing sleep. Yeah,
great. When I talk with patients, I deal with various aspects of the immune system. I'll often ask them, where's your stress level? Give me a 0 to 10. And a lot of times, it's not that bad. But then when I dig into it a little bit more, it's because they've gotten used to stress being at this level. For most of us, stress should be down here, but for them, it's up here. I think the family and friends in the work chapters really gave us some thoughts and ways to deal with some of our family and deal with our friends and work. And I just would like you to kind of touch on some of that, because I think what stood out to me is that there were several vignettes, some fictitious and some from your own personal life. But I remember as I was reading them, I was like, oh, I really hadn't thought about hitting it from that angle or saying this to this person. So mention a little bit of that for our listeners, so that they'll have an idea of how this can help us reduce stress and all those pro-inflammatory cytokines and mediators and whatnot.
One thing really quick before, because you can answer that question, but I want to point one thing you said, Mike, that's really helpful is that a lot of people aren't aware, right? They've almost, we talk about this sort of that sensitizing to the American diet, right? We talk about that, right? There's that sort of neuroadaptation. Well, that happens with this too. So you don't realize that, so we will talk about, and this happens with Alona, right? She'll sometimes just make dinner because that's what she does. And then to stop and say, hey, do I really want to make dinner? That's like a big deal. That's a big step. And then for her to even have space to say it and not think to herself, I'm a bad mom if I don't make dinner. And then how to manage, what do we do if I don't make dinner? And then how am I going to handle when I tell my husband and my kids I don't want to make dinner? So then we say, well, we're not going to do all that. Let's just make dinner, right? So there's this whole process that we've sort of educated and normalized that needs to be undone. And I think that's when people wake up to that, that's when all of a sudden life can start to get better and ultimately get to wonderful.
And I think that normalization and what you just said, Mike, is why wellness has now become that baseline that doesn't necessarily equate to optimal health at all, because we've normalized being stressed. We can be that stressed and still think of ourselves as well. But the implications of that on our health and well-being is huge. And I think, again, that comes back to, it really comes back to that self pillar. And then it comes back to learning the skills to have that agency so that you can connect. And that's where nonviolent communication also comes in as a super helpful tool in helping you connect to needs and feelings. And then once you have that, then exploring strategies to meet those needs. And that's a really important vocabulary to allow us to relate differently to the environments around us. And I think that's a really big piece of showing up in that authenticity, is feeling like you can navigate that agency, you have the vocabulary, and it comes back to, and the simplicity of it is, when our needs are met, we have very pleasant emotions. Life can be wonderful. When our needs are not met, we have unpleasant feelings, and we may not feel that life is so wonderful. And so then it becomes a question of, well, how can I meet my needs in a way that also can meet the needs of the people around me, the people, that are in my circle, in my life, whether that's my family and friends or my work. But having that initial vocabulary is what makes that possible and even eventually easy to do.
And we talk about like connection energy. I mean, you can have whatever terminology you want to use, but if the focus is on being with other people, and the most important thing is the quality of that connection with that other person, then you can even mourn or grieve that, hey, we can't think of a strategy right now. I don't know what to do about dinner, but let's put that on the side about what to do, even though we were taught to be, do. Put that on the side. Let's just connect that I care about you, you care about me. And right now we're confused. We don't know what to do, but I want you to know that your needs matter and my needs matter. I have a need for food. You might have a need for rest. And let's just care about each other's needs right in this moment. And it doesn't have to, I'm not saying you don't ever forget about dinner, but in this moment, that connection, even though you're mourning, can be wonderful.
And from that care and that connection, a strategy bubbles.
Yes.
We've never had a situation where a strategy did not bubble that met the needs that we were trying to address. It might take a little bit more time, but that time is at the front end versus the back end where, in the dinner example, I make dinner, I'm resentful, I'm seeping inside, then I, snap at Matt or I snap at my kids, and then I go through that whole thing of, now I have to go and repair. How much time did that take, living in that state of angst and stress and judgment? And sometimes we've normalized that too. Well, that's okay, but taking a little bit more time in the front end, and I don't have time for that.
Right.
So keeping it in perspective too.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed in some of the scenarios you presented in the book was just what you were talking about, sort of working backwards, like, okay, I'm frustrated, I'm stressed. Okay, let's look at my needs, the people's needs around me, and then let's work backwards from that. Let's go to that connection component, try to connect to those. Then the strategy, as you said, just sort of falls into place. And I would say for listeners that some of these concepts are like, wow, this is new. I've never heard of this before. The book covers it very, very well in excellent terms and in excellent ways to help you understand how can I incorporate this into my overall wholeness of health and wholeness, just like we talk about whole foods with a W, we talk about wholeness or holistic approach to health with a W. And that to me is where this book is. It's the strength is that it looks at all of those components. And the other thing, you talk about nonviolent communication. As I read that, I thought, boy, could the world really use that right now? I mean, wouldn't it be great if the whole world could understand that concept of nonviolent communication?
Yes, and for many reasons, everybody sort of being home and isolated, social media, where you lose the ability to see the impact of your actions on other people, and that goes both ways, right? When I contribute to their well-being, and I lose the ability to see how I've just contributed and served life through their celebration, through their appreciation. And the flip side, in the world today, we can throw out anything, and unfortunately, disconnecting language has been educated so much that comes out so easily and so habitually. But now we don't even get the feedback from the other person. Whoa, that had an impact. And we naturally care about the impact on people. I believe nobody wants to hurt someone else. But sometimes they've been educated in a way where they become insensitive to other people's needs, or they become preoccupied with getting their needs met, regardless of the cost of other people. But again, that's education. That is not their natural state. So if we've been educated in that way, what's exciting, and I'm the first person to say we can be educated in this new way of connection. I'm someone that was pretty disconnected, which is probably why this spoke to me. Similar to the plant-based diet. I was eating the Atkins diet when I first started this. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this book's telling me to be vegan. I don't want to be vegan, but similarly, I'm reading, I'm learning about connection, and I'm like, whoa, I got a lot of work to do. So to me, but now it feels so natural. At the time, it felt really awkward. But it took me 5 hours to cook French toast the first time, vegan French toast, the first time I tried to cook it. That did not feel natural. But I learned how, and now it feels very natural.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's a journey, it's a process. And I think for all of our listeners, they're here because they want to learn. And I certainly learned a lot in reading your book. We have about 10 minutes left. I want to cover a couple more things quickly. I want you to mention and tell us a little bit about We Heal. What is We Heal? What's going on there? And then we'll circle back and let you kind of give your summarizing closing thoughts, what you want people to take away from this. So let's start with We Heal.
Yeah, so We Heal is our virtual platform, and it delivers the nutrition, lifestyle, and connection medicine that we talk about in Wellness to Wonderful and that we share today. And we do that through a variety of different avenues. We have a lot of articles and blogs to get to know the information more. We have classes that we're running. We run nutrition classes throughout the year. Matt and I are doing a master class in September for anyone who's interested in registering. You just need to go to weheal.health, and the registration information is there. And that class is about how do we get from wellness to wonderful. and incorporate nonviolent communication and many of the aspects that we talked about today. And so we run classes, and then we also have health coaching, health and nutrition coaching with our health and nutrition mentor, trauma recovery coaching, and then opportunities to see me and Matt individually as well.
And there's also resources, so you can go and there's recipes, fantastic whole food, plant-based, oil-free recipes. There's some resources to help people with changing over their diets. There's also
feelings and needs vocabulary,
connection resources.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really cool role play where I work with someone with a mom who we role play. I play mom with NVC skills, and she plays her teenage son who's using the iPad too much, according to mom, and we connect around that. So there's just some really cool resources too that are available.
Yeah, again, I like the practical aspects of all of this that you can incorporate into your life, wherever it may be, wherever your stress may be in your life, wherever the holes are in your trip to wonderful. This book really covers them all, and I just wanted to take a minute to mention the 9 pillars for those that may not have your book yet. Self is the first one, then nutrition, and you all did an excellent job of summarizing whole food, plant-based nutrition. It's very well done in that second pillar. Activity, exercise. We talked about play. We talked about sleep, family and friends, work, spirituality, and the natural world. Those are the 9 pillars. Right in the middle of those 9 pillars is an entire chapter on the connection concept that Alona and Matthew have been talking about this evening. So it's all there, and it's the type of thing that you'll probably. I found myself going back and sort of rereading certain chapters and sections, particularly as I saw the recurring themes. I was like, oh, I need to go back and make sure I've got this down. So as we sort of start to wind this up here in the next few minutes, take some time to tell us what you hope the participants of this webinar, and really those that will read your book, what do you want them to get, and what can they expect to get on their own personal health journeys?
My hope is that, and my belief is that we can all get to wonderful, and it is absolutely doable, and that it is something that we should strive for. And so for me, it's my hope that people aspire to that and believe that it is possible, and then find the ways, just like we do, to ask, well, what would it take to make life wonderful? And I'm going to go for that.
And maybe for some people, it'll be helpful to replace the word wonderful with a sense of inner peace and satisfaction, right? It's because a lot of people think wonderful is happy. And it's really about being connected, self-connected, and connected to other people in a way that you live in a state of inner peace and satisfaction as much of the time as possible. And you live in a state of choice and sort of consciousness that is, instead of autopilot, going through life, hunkering down, the white knuckles. And when you're in that state, that's the life is wonderful.
Excellent. Yeah, wonderful is a word that we like, but it's nice to put some other words to it, Matthew. Any specific practical steps or strategies that you would want your readers to glean as they read the book? I know we've talked about the main concepts, the polyvagal theory, the connection, the needs, strategies, all of that, but just take a moment to kind of summarize that for us.
Yeah, I would tell people, there's don't just do something, stand there, instead of don't just stand there, do something, right? To just take a minute to start checking inside and being like, hey, is this apply to me? Are there areas that I would like to tend to? Would I like to explore? I mean, this is a journey. It's, people will say, tell me in 1 minute, the one thing that I got to do to make make life wonderful. And I'll be like, that's like saying it took 4,000 turns to get from Los Angeles to New York, but tell me how to get there with one turn. And I'm like, that's not possible. So to me, it's like, hey, this is a journey.
There you go.
Just start checking in, making some space to look inside and say, hey, do I want to show up differently? Do I want to feel a little differently? Do I want to explore this? And then slowly but surely, if you're committed, you can re-educate yourself in a way that really does make life wonderful.
Yeah, I think Wellness to Wonderful is an invitation to take that personal journey, to take, for many of us, for the first time, to really step into that self-inventory and check into, what are my needs? Do I have needs? We've been programmed so much to suppress and repress our needs on so many levels. So that ability to take time for that self-inventory and that self-awareness, and then see what evolves from that.
Excellent. Great summary. Renee, you want to come on and share some questions? I know that I've seen a bunch of them popping up in the chat. So go ahead and share some questions with Alona and me.
Absolutely. And I've got to say, this has been just such a wonderful talk. And I think it really speaks to the fact of like holism, right? And the way that the body, we need to focus on so many things, not just nutrition. And that's really one thing that we really focus on at the center as well. So someone had a question. Is it possible to have a perfect balance in the 9 pillars at some point in someone's lives if they work hard enough at it? Or is there always going to be one that might be kind of tipped downward?
Here's the way to think about the 9 pillars. Think of it as 9 beautiful children. And if those children are going to need different attention at different times, and there's no one that's more important than the other, but in the moment, there's one child that's falling down the steps and another one that needs help with their homework. You're going to tend to the one falling down the steps first, right? But there's no state of like, oh, everybody's good, I don't have to worry about the children ever again. For the rest of your life, you're going to be caring about them. And it's not about making it easy. The easiest way to deal with children is to adopt them when they're 18 and send them off to college, right? But you miss out on the first 18 years. That's where the joy is. So that's the way we like to think about it.
Right. And I would just caveat that with its attention to the 9 pillars. That doesn't mean that there has to be an immense amount of work invested in each of those pillars. So you can get to, when you've tended to these pillars and they become kind of your autopilot, and you're just kind of taking that inventory. Oh, are we good in play? Oh, are we good here? Are we good here? Oh, you know what? I didn't actually, connect with, I haven't connected with friends in a couple days, whatever. So it doesn't mean that you're going to be spending an immense amount of time, but you do have to pay attention. Just like, you're driving, you have to pay attention. You're cooking, you have to pay attention, so, but it can be an easy attention versus
right. That attention, and to think of needs as something that it's a flow, almost like an energetic flow, right? Like it's like saying, am I ever going to eat enough food that I'll never be hungry again? No, you need food, and you're going to have a need for food, and then you're going to eat, and then you're not going to have a need for food anymore. And then maybe 6 hours, 10 hours, whatever later, the need comes up again. So it's more of this flow versus a state that's static.
And one of the things I'm kind of hearing you guys say as well is, this non-judgmental piece too. So if someone's sleep pillar isn't where they want it, don't beat yourself up about it, but start to address those things that you can in order to help get it in balance, and not, focus on the negativity, right?
Right, because judgment and criticism are tragic strategies to try and tend to needs and to keep you in integrity with your values, right? Or someone's imposed values, right? If your parents said this was the right way to be and this is the way to be loved, and if you're not this way, you're not going to be accepted and loved. You internalize that. But it's really connecting to your values in the moment. So if you accidentally hit somebody, not that I'm bad, don't criticize, but that might be the first way. Oh, wow, you're so inconsiderate. Why would you hit her? Okay, I'm just going to check in and be, okay, I really value kindness and care. And I didn't meet that need in that moment in consideration. It's not that I'm good or bad, I just didn't. And I'm going to go and check in now and repair and make sure she's okay because I just impacted her. But the criticism is just letting you know, and the judgment is just letting you know you have values that need your attention.
And one of the most successful ways to actually implement and sustain changes is self-compassion and compassion in general, because that compassion allows us to get curious around, the sleep pillar is out of whack. So rather than go to judgment, the compassion allows us to get curious around, why is my sleep pillar out of whack? Oh, let me see what needs aren't being met. And how do, and it allows us to delve in deeper versus shutting it down and just plowing forward on that automatic autopilot that, we just keep going on that same path.
Right. It's like what Mike was saying before, right? With the connection energy, the quality connection, you can do that with yourself too. You can either say, what do I got to do to fix my sleep? Or you can take a second and be like, I'm really wanting more sleep and I'm wondering what's getting in the way of that. And just slowing it down and connecting to yourself. And then you'll figure out what to do later versus jumping into what do I do? What do I do? Which is an intensity in and of itself.
That's not going to get you to sleep.
Awesome. And then our next question is, we've talked a lot about how stress and food as well causes a pro-inflammatory state very quickly in the body. How quickly can someone reverse that pro-inflammatory state if they start to focus in on the pillars that are maybe in dysfunction at that moment?
You know what? It's really quick. And one of the ways that you can even see that happen is if you have a moment where you are, just imagine your body feeling really tense about something, and you just take a few minutes to take those deep breaths. One of the things that we like to do is an exercise called 5-finger breathing, where we'll breathe up and down our fingers. So you take a deep breath in, and then you release it out, and you take another deep breath in, and you release it out. You go up and down your fingers and then go, to your fingers on the other side. And you can do that with someone else. And you see how quickly your body responds to, I am safe. I can, the body just relaxes. So it really can happen fairly quickly.
And we teach people also to not just do those exercises when they're stressed, but also do those exercises when they're calm, and build that muscle memory so that their body starts to connect calmness with those exercises. So it makes them even more effective. So that's, and you can, we release anti-inflammatory cytokines too. So your body is constantly going back and forth. It's not static, even though we think it is, right? So it's going like this, pro-inflammatory, anti-inflammatory, and it's sort of finding this balance, and you have to be in threat. Oh, we're safe. And that's what's happening all the time. And it happens very, very quickly.
Awesome. It's good to know that because, I think a lot of times too, we get focused on the long term of what happens too. And even those little moments where we're changing that mental state by our physicality and what we're doing, that's huge.
Right. And a lot of times there's also, just like with diet, people say the diet doesn't work for me and they just need a little tweak. It's not the food isn't working. It's what they're doing is they didn't quite get everything. Similar with this. So people are angry and they're like, well, I reflected and now I'm doing the exercises and I'm still angry. But you see how they're trying to make the anger go away. And if you try to make something go away, you're telling your body it's dangerous, it's bad. So now we'll actually do an exercise with them in the moment, and we'll actually make space for their anger, and we'll hear what the anger is trying to tell them. And there's this wealth of information and communication that's happening. And then when that happens, it naturally passes. Just like any feelings come and go. I never have someone come to me and say, I'm really worried that this happiness is never going to go away. Right? But there's that with unpleasant feelings, there's a fear that is this ever going to go away? All feelings, pleasant or unpleasant, they come and go. And if they're not, you're either resisting or grasping onto something. And we can help you with that pretty quickly.
Awesome. So another question here. What do you suggest if your kids are resisting being whole food plant-based? You mentioned in your book, it's good for them to feel they have a choice. But what do you do if you feel that this is really best for them and their health? How do you navigate that?
That's a great question. And I think that a lot of that comes back to connecting to needs and then getting to the strategies. So we all have a need for health. Our kids, even when they resist eating a certain way or eating certain foods, still have a need for health. Can we connect them to that need for health? And then is it education? Does it come out, well, no, I need meat for protein. or I need animal foods for protein. Well, let's do a little education dive into that. And once that need is, once that need of discovery and learning is met, does that impact their choice? So it really is about what is preventing them from eating a whole food plant-based diet.
And go ahead.
And then how do we get, on the same page around that?
And it's about connection. If your focus is on, I got to get them to be whole food plant-based now, that's a strategy. And that's going to be disconnecting. Even if they will eventually see the value of that, they're going to lose their autonomy and resist.
Right. Because it could also be like, I want to be like my friends. Well, okay. So when your friends eat pizza, can we make a vegan pizza? When your friends are eating burgers and fries, can we have a vegan, when they're having cake and cookies, can we bring the same thing so that you do belong? You're having the same things. You're not bringing your broccoli and rice when they're having pizza. And taking time to build that connection, that quality connection is key. So if you say, okay, even if they, I keep picking on McDonald's, I should pick on other fast food, Wendy's, right? Like even if they eat a whole meal of Wendy's, most kids in that moment, it's not going to affect their long-term health, right? So let's relax and say, okay, what you do for this meal is not as significant. It's not, and definitely not as important as our connection. But I'd love to talk to you about some concerns that are coming up for me. And more importantly, I'd love to hear what needs of yours are coming up. And that's really important. That's a really important piece too, that it does not mean they don't want to do that. Doesn't mean you don't have a space to share your concerns and your needs and your particular preferences for why this is part of your family dynamic, right? So it's not just acquiescing to their needs.
And it's also not forcing them to hear it in that moment.
Right.
They might be so used to what Alona talked about, submitting, rebelling, that they're like, I am not going to eat what you tell me, and I am not going to listen to you tell me why. And you're building trust again, right? And when you build that trust again, you say, okay, I'm hearing that I'm doing empathy now, right? I'm hearing that you're really needing some choice right now. And that maybe over the years, I've been telling you things in a way that you just don't feel connected to your choice. And I really want to do that differently. So eat whatever you want, whatever, again, you have to decide what that is, right? Are you going to buy or not? But let's not worry about what you eat tonight. But I would love to get to a place where we can share our needs and hear each other. And most importantly, I'd love to be able to tell you what I'm hearing your needs are. And I'd love you to be able to tell you what you're hearing my needs are. And if we can get to that place, that's right there is going to be increased quality connection. And from there, we'll figure out what to do. But my guess is your child cares about health and their well-being. And my guess is you care about choice and autonomy. So let's support each other with that.
Awesome ways to put it. I love that. So do you have suggestions on how to approach a situation where you try to use nonviolent communication with someone and the individual you're dialoguing with maybe really resists or responds negatively to that dialogue?
Yes. So as soon as I have an idea that I'm using nonviolent communication on somebody, it's now a tactic versus it's a way of being with people and communicating. And my focus of nonviolent communication is not about the words, it's about the connection. And if I have a thought in my head that they're resisting, remember, everything people are doing is to meet needs. So resisting is not an observation. Or they might say, oh, they have a face like this. And they're like, when I'm talking, oh, so what need is coming up with them? Well, they're probably nervous and not comfortable to share that they're not enjoying what I'm saying. And for whatever reason, maybe they're protecting themselves. Maybe it's choice, freedom. Maybe they're bored. Maybe there's so many different feelings, and there's needs that are behind whatever I'm observing that I'm interpreting as resistance. But it's my thought is they're resisting. What I'm observing is maybe a facial expression or words, or they're walking away. So I'll even say to my kids, I'll say, when I see you roll your eyes like that, I'm guessing you don't like what I'm saying. It's not working for you, and you're not sure how to tell me. And they'll say, yeah, Dad. And I'll say, well, that matters to me. And I'm glad we figured that out. Right? So and you see how I'm slowing it down, and it's my tone. Because my focus is connection versus that's how I used to do it. Don't you roll your eyes at me. right? That was my old, that didn't work very well. So you see everything they're doing is to meet needs and the best they can with the skills and the awareness and the capacity they have in the moment.
And I think you brought up a good point, and that's the one that I really want people to take home with them. It's our intention. What are we coming into this conversation? What is the intention of our conversation at the moment? Is it for me to get you to do what I'm telling you to do, or for me to get you to listen to what I have to say? Or is it for us to connect? Because sometimes you come to someone and they don't want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
We're not in a space for that. Right. And have that ability to say, hey, I care about you, and I just don't have space for this conversation right now.
Right. Getting empathy.
Can we find a time 10 minutes from now, an hour from now, to circle back to this? And the agency there is, I care about you. I care about this conversation. I'm not into it right now. And so I'm not going to show up with any kind of connective energy, and we're not going to get anywhere that we want to get to. So putting it on hold for an hour, if it's not an emergency, and I can show up with that connection energy, oh, how much more effective and connected will we be in this conversation?
I mean, that's the thing, is when you're upset and triggered, trying to get empathy from the person you're triggered or who stimulated you is really hard. There's a way to do that. We show that, but it's really hard. It takes, a little bit of skill. So maybe get empathy from someone else. And sometimes as a parent, I'm so overwhelmed and under-resourced, I'll own that I'm making a demand. Like a lot of people will say, I asked you to put your shoes away. You're not asking them, you're demanding it. So own it. Say, I'm so overwhelmed right now, and I see all this clutter in the house, and I don't have space right now for choice. So I'm going to make a demand that you put those shoes away. It may or may not work, but because we have that trust and I don't make demands that often, they'll do it just to help me out at that point, because they can still connect to their contribution to me.
And I think that's key. There is a trust that is built into showing up with this intention. And it takes time because we're re-educating, it is that same kind of thing that when we go on a whole food plant-based diet, we got to learn how to do the recipes. We have to learn what foods we like and what we don't like, what we want to make again and what we don't, how to do this in a sustainable way. And so many of us, including us, have communicated in an authoritarian, power over kind of situation where now we have to re-educate and we have to build that trust, and that will take a little bit of time, but it's a time in the front end that pays itself over and over again on the other side.
One of the quickest things people can do if they're just starting off is just not just say what they want to say, but check how it was for the other person. So just do that. Just say, how was it what I just shared? How did that land? How do you feel after hearing what I just said? Like, just to show that care. That's one of the most important things. People just want to know that you care about them. So just that little bit of checking in. A lot of people just have to say what they want and they're done. Right? So I'm just giving you little examples there. There's lots of ways to build that trust.
It sounds like it's a pretty two-way street too, where you have to check in with not only that individual you're talking about or talking to, but also yourself, right? Because that self-awareness component, it sounds like that's so significant in this nonviolent communication, recognizing when you need that, hey, give me 10 minutes. I need this space. I need to decompress after work. We'll get to that conversation. I just can't right now. And I think that's one of the most important things I'm hearing you guys say too, is that it's also self-reflection on what you need at that moment too. And not only, that individual too, right? It's that two-way kind of discussion.
Absolutely, because that's the only way really to elevate to life is wonderful, or to that joy and satisfaction and inner peace. The other side of that is living in what we call artificial harmony. We are resentful, we are angry, we are holding all of that in, we have disdain, and we disconnect from those people that we love because of all of that.
Yeah.
And we can switch that around, but we have to be willing to show up in that authenticity, to check in, to have those difficult conversations and learn how to do that. And that elevates all of our experiences to that state.
Yeah, that checking in is so important, and it's so unusual for people first when we start working with them. I still do this. I have a timer on my watch that you can set for a certain amount of time, and you can, when it goes off, you can just hit a button and it'll go again. And I'll set it for an hour, every hour in the morning, and it'll go off, and I'll just check in. And when I'm where the kids are running around, like nuts downstairs and yelling back and forth and they're fighting, instead of an hour, I might do 5 minutes. Or sometimes I've done 1 minute where I'm like, oh my God, Matt, I just want to keep staying self-connected. And then I'm still working with them about my needs. There's lots of ways I could walk out of the room. I could put earplugs in. I could ask them if they were to talk to them, but I don't want to lose my self-connection. And that timer going off every minute is saying the furthest I'm going to go before I snap back into self-connection is 1 minute. And it's interesting, just by setting the timer, I'm setting a whole different intention. So I'm practicing throughout the day. An hour means everything's good. If I do 30 minutes, that means, hey, we're starting to collapse here a little bit, but that's my way of staying self-connected. It doesn't just happen all of a sudden because I think I want to be. I have to take action and start building that new muscle memory.
Wonderful. Well, I know we've kind of hit time, so I will pass the torch back to Mike.
All right. Well, part of being the host is you get to ask the last question. So I noticed that Maya Bialik is quoted on the cover of your book. I was just curious, how do you know Blossom?
Yeah, well, that's a long story, but we resonate with, so much of what Mayim is doing. But Mayim happened to be my neighbor when I was growing up. She lived right down the block, and she and my younger brother are the same age. So we played a lot all together as neighborhood kids.
How cool is that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the neuroscientist and actress. She's got a lot of talents going on there. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Alona and Matthew, thank you. This has been a wonderful time. I'm certain that people are going to want to go buy Wellness to Wonderful, because it is an excellent resource with lots of good practical tools and scientific concepts to help us understand, how we can get that WHOLE, whole health, all together. So thank you all for writing that book. Thank you for taking the time to come and share with us this evening.
Thank you so much for having us and for this wonderful conversation.
And thank you, Mike. Just to let you know, I'll do an NVC appreciation, which is when I hear how much you reference the specific parts of the book. And I got this sense of like, wow, this so matters to Mike, and he really cares and invests in something that matters deeply to me, that I feel really touched. And I was so inspired and encouraged and happy to be here. And I want you to know how much you contributed to me. And Renee also, just the way you've throughout the last few months supporting us and really clearly giving me a sense that you care and this matters genuinely. I just want you to know how that impacts me.
Thank you guys so much. Absolutely.
It's our privilege. It's our privilege, really. And,
absolutely.
Appreciate you all taking the time to come and chat with our audience tonight. And just want to mention to our audience that our next Spotlight on Health will be, correct me if I'm wrong, Renee, I believe it's September the 13th. Does that sound right?
I believe that's correct. I can look at my calendar. Hold on one second.
I'm pretty sure it is. It's the second Wednesday, I think. In,
September 13th. Yep.
Yeah, there we go. September 13th. And we will be talking with Dr. Alan Goldhammer and Dr. Colin Campbell. So we look forward to that next month. So on behalf of the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies, we want to thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing you next month. Goodbye, everyone. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.